are listening to The Saints, and we're going to interview this brother who we all know and love and think sort of highly of.
Very highly of.
Very highly of. Our good friend, Thomas Fortson, everybody.
Woo.
Thomas, woo.
Hey, everybody.
Woo, there he is. He's on the line.
Yes.
The Skype line.
Yes.
And so before, if you're just tuning in, my name is RC.
And this is Andrew.
This is Tyrone.
This is Allison.
This is Carrie. This is Bridget.
And this is Thomas.
There he is.
There he is.
All right, so Thomas, we call him T-Pain, Sweet Tea, Tom the Bomb, never to his face, but we call him all those things. How do we know this brother?
Well, we met Thomas in Gainesville.
Yeah.
Flo Rida. Because there's several Gainesvilles in America.
That's a good point, RC.
Yes. Is that true, Thomas?
That is true. There's like 7 of them, I think.
Oh, I didn't know
7,
that.
wow.
Is it true that that's where we met you?
Yes, that is also true.
That's
Awesome.
true, RC.
That's true. That's awesome. All right.
Okay, Thomas, so you mind starting us off with kind of your early experience with the Lord?
Yes.
Sure, that's going to go way back. My parents took us, my sister and I, to church because we grew up in the South, and that's what you do.
Mm-hmm.
But it was more cultural than actual, like, knowing the Lord. So anyway, that was as a child. I didn't actually ask the Lord into my heart until a week before high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sincere for many years, but had no discipleship, no understanding that you could even grow.
Yeah.
While all the people in my in the congregation I was going to in high school, they were sincere. They definitely, at least some of them, like dropped the ball, because I know the youth group that I was a part of, I really, like, I kind of tried to make friends, but there was nothing happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't really understand. So I had, been a true believer, but for 4 years I was a complete baby until I came to college.
Mm-hmm.
I really rocketed my walk with the Lord because I started to get to know people that actually pursued the Lord.
Nice.
And it's kind of funny. There was a mentality in my high school church that was kind of against higher education because so many people go to college and kind of lose their faith, or it's a fairly liberal place to be. And my experience was the exact opposite. It was absolutely what my faith needed, was to be in a place where just people were actually pursuing the Lord instead of just kind of going through the motions or just doing what they thought was what the Lord wanted to do. And to some degree, maybe it was, but it definitely wasn't the full measure of what the Lord wanted.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that was back in the late 90s, and I got with a interdenominational college group, and many of the people in my high school would be amazed at the fact that I was in a small group that was led by 2 people. One was a very white guy from a Southern Baptist church, and the other was a very Hispanic Catholic from Southern Miami.
That's awesome.
It was one of the most diverse things I'd ever been a part of, but it was freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And so that was just one of many paradigms that just because someone's a Catholic doesn't mean that they're definitely going to hell. I mean, it's just. It's like you look back on these things and they're just silly, but at the time they seem real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I was in that denomination, or I'm sorry, it was in that non-denominational Christian group for many years, and I noticed something. I noticed that by no attempt on my own, many of my friends would have kind of like their self-initiated wilderness experience. In other words, they would intentionally stop going to our Christian group, or they would intentionally stop going to church, or they would intentionally stop believing in God, just to kind of like test for themselves if it's real. And I didn't even try for it, but I noticed that usually I was the only person or one of the very few people that they actually stayed in contact with. So without even me knowing about it, that the Lord was kind of preparing me to deal with people who were kind of in a spiritual wilderness, which is kind of a funny term, because we generally when you think of wilderness, you think like barrenness, and to some degree in some aspects it might be, but I think the wilderness is some of the all of my friends who went through those experiences, it was one of the best experiences of their lives. So was it actually barren? No, it was the opposite of that. So it seems like it at times, but really it's incredibly fruitful.
All right.
So blah blah. Finished college. I was in various institutional churches, each for about 3 to 5 years at a time. And then I read a little book called Pagan Christianity, and I didn't have the reaction to the book that a lot of people do. A lot of people seem to either really have their eyes opened and be like blown away, or read it and get like a really big sigh of relief to realize that they're not the only ones.
Right.
When I read it, it was like, okay, that's very thought-provoking, and I can kind of see what he's saying, and yeah, the system might be, wrecked, but, the Lord uses it, and, I had been in institutional churches my entire, 14 years of knowing the Lord at that point, and I had grown, so, yeah, it's not the best system, but, I'm not the best human either, and God uses me, and God uses it, so... So anyway, I looked around for an institutional church. I'm sorry, for an organic church, but
from reading
didn't
that
really
book.
find. I'm sorry.
From after reading that book, right?
Yeah. From after reading the book, and couldn't find one.
I think this is an interesting part of your story, because when did you read that book?
Yeah.
I read the book, I want to say in the summer of 2009.
Right.
And I, ironically, I didn't notice at the time, obviously, but the church that I eventually became a part of, the house church, it was meeting like 300 yards from where I lived at the time.
Right.
And I wasn't even aware of it.
Right.
So a year passes, and I had a friend, and he invited me to church Saturday night, and I didn't have anything going on Saturday night, and so I went, and I had no idea what I was going to. I had a Saturday night free. I want to hang out with my friend, go to church, sure, why not? And so I went to this house church. Now, this is a year after reading the book, and I realized that, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I was looking for a year ago. I'm going to keep going to this.
Yeah.
So for a while, I was going to both my institutional church and the house church we met on Saturdays.
Yeah, so this is now fall of 2010, right?
Yeah, fall of 2010. And I think I started going almost within like 3 weeks of when
when we got there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny. I wish I had a time machine and could like be a fly on the wall and just like observe. That'd be so much fun.
Yeah.
You were wearing a leather jacket, and it's like, hey, who's this Thomas character?
Thomas was wearing a leather jacket?
Yeah.
Well, that's right. I did have a leather jacket. That's right. No, he's right. I thought he was making a joke at first, but no, I actually did.
Too, right?
No, it was Russell that had a big fro.
Thomas had a fro at one time, too.
Really?
Yes, he did.
Oh, I don't remember
Yeah,
that.
I did.
Okay. Okay, sorry. So you're doing both.
So I'm doing both for about a few months. And the funny thing is that season, that fall of 2010, like every major thing in my life changed. I was happily single for a decade, and I started becoming interested in having a relationship. I had a very good friend who he and I had been roommates for 6 years, and we both felt that season was over. I'd been working full-time for many years, and I thought that I was supposed to go back to school. So I quit that, or I way cut down on my hours. And I started, going from a, institutional church with, 1,500 members to a very small church with 30 members, 30 adults at least. So it was just weird. It just everything changed. So after about a few months and like the Lord just like rearranging my life, it became clear that He wanted me to focus on the house church as like my main jam, and so I suppose for reasons I won't get into, the main connection I had to the house church. Actually, you know what? That could sound like it's bad or something. It was because of my sleeping schedule. I was doing night shifts, but anyway, I was only.
That's bad, Thomas.
Yeah.
So bad.
My main connection to the church that I had been going to was the children's ministry, and the children's pastor and I were good friends, and I explained to him what was going on, and he fully gave me support in not doing his ministry anymore and just going to the house church, and he was all thumbs, he was all good with it, and recently actually I saw him and we're still totally on good terms.
Awesome.
So yeah, he's a great guy. So yeah, one of the first lessons I learned in organic church after being there for a few months was that paradigms don't change quickly.
They don't.
It's just going. You have so many mindsets of being in fairly large institutional churches for 14 years. You adopt mindsets you're not even aware of.
Sure. Yep.
And just kind of letting that stuff slough off you. It just takes time.
Yes. I really like that you point out that you're not even aware of them.
Yeah.
And so, yep.
Yeah. It's like any discipline, whether it's running a business, anatomy, computer programming, landscaping, or learning about your own paradigms, the more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know. Because it's like the more you tap the surface, you realize, wow, there's way more here than I realized.
Yeah.
And the same with old earthly paradigms, And the beautiful thing about the faithfulness of the Lord is that when I'm 80, I still want to be having paradigms changed about how glorious He is and how what life can be like. So it's just there's always new revelation and ways of seeing things that he desires to express.
Yep.
So that's cool.
Yeah,
That's very
I'd
cool.
agree.
So you,
He's more the exception than the rule. He said.
Oh yeah.
There was this church meeting 300 yards from him after he read this book. That doesn't happen, except to Thomas. People are like, oh, man, there's going to be one in my town.
300 yards from me.
Yeah, not necessarily.
nope.
Yep. And you know what's funny? Usually when I read a book, I will learn a little bit about the author, but for whatever reason, maybe it was the Lord, preventing me from doing that. In the book, it says where Frank lives, and if I had known that he had lived in the same town, I totally would have tried to get in touch with him directly or something.
Yeah.
But because Gainesville's not that big of a town.
Yeah, because Frank lived in Gainesville at that time.
Yeah. But that's not what the Lord wants.
That's right.
Yeah.
The Lord was drawing you unto Himself, not unto an author.
Right.
Yeah, and that's honestly that's a lesson I'd learned. Even way prior to being in the house church is that my main goal for a while was to do just to be a good Christian and to do ministry for Him until He told me that a lot of the stuff that I do for Him wasn't actually of Him.
Wow.
And so that was kind of a watershed moment where the course of my life changed. So my focus became on getting to know the Lord.
Yes.
And that was a pivotal moment. And that was, probably, 8 to 10 years before I even heard about organic church at all. And that's just how the Lord, to whoever's heart is faithful towards Him, He will meet their need. He won't meet their wants, but He will meet their needs.
Yes.
Yes.
Most of the people in the house church that I was a part of had moved to Gainesville to be a part of the church. I would say when I got there, maybe 60 to 70% of the people there
Yep.
weren't from Gainesville.
Yep.
It was just weird. I've gotten this group and found out there was people from Ohio, people from Pennsylvania, people from Texas, people from Michigan.
Indiana.
Good gracious, man. It's
People
just
from
like
Oregon.
Oregon.
Yep.
Oregon. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Mark.
Oklahoma.
Yeah. A lot of places.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
don't need the zip code and down to that. But that told me that, okay, this is something different. I mean, obviously, these people have a lot of buy-in, right? If they're willing to move here,
Yep.
tells me they're going to be pretty committed to them
Skin in the game.
and
Yep.
to each other. And also, just practically, when you move to a city, you don't know a lot of people. So the people that were there, like, that's who they had,
Yep.
like, socially.
Yep.
And that's also why, I mean, for a while I wasn't really involved because I didn't want to, like, just abandon all the friends I had because I had lived in Gainesville, you know, for, I don't know, at least 12 years at that point. So I had built up a good, you know, friend and social base.
Right. So you spent 3.5 years meeting together with saints outside
Did I?
of institutional Christianity. Yep.
Did I really?
Yeah.
You did, Thomas. You really, really did.
Yep.
So you were talking about taking time for our paradigms to shift, and just having mindsets that we aren't even aware that we have. So,
Right.
what would be one or two of kind of the biggest paradigm shifts you feel like the Lord brought about through your experience meeting with the saints in Gainesville?
I guess without knowing it, I found security in the regularity of the service that happened every week at institutional church. There seemed to be, I guess, okay, I was watching this podcast one time, and this guy was saying how when we study history, like way back history, like Native Americans, you know, before Columbus got here, we just blindly, sometimes even subconsciously think that just because they're primitive technology-wise, that they're also primitive, like, morally wise. Right? And the inverse of that is that because we're more advanced technologically, we're also more superior ethically and morally.
Wow.
Right? Sure. And that's obviously not the case.
Not the case.
That's
well,
not true, Thomas.
think of that kind of dynamic as it relates to the institutional versus the organic church. I think because the institutional church has so much, you know, I'm doing air quotes here, technology. In other words, you know, they have structure. There's a lot of people there. It's been very well established over, you know, tens of years or hundreds of years or centuries or, you know, just depending on the denomination.
Right.
That there had to be some, without even knowing it, that kind of gives you some reliability to it. Okay. Without realizing it, like the true reality, the true substance, the true safety is in the Lord himself. And
Right.
the organic church, and I want to say something a little in a few minutes about the word organic itself.
Okay.
But in the organic church, like, you don't have a lot of the props
Yep.
that you do in an institutional church.
No, you don't.
And in a sense, you are forced to either go to Scripture, go to the Lord, go to the other people in the group, or the other believers that you know. But that, like, winnows it down so that you have to seek the Lord, because the Lord's in our brothers and sisters as well.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, to us it does.
And I don't want to speak negative about the people in the institutional church.
Right.
Because one thing that really irritated me was that, well, first of all, just because you're in an organic church, you're still going to have people that are messed up. You're still going to have
Yes.
a core and a periphery.
Yep.
You're going to have people that are, you know, seem to be very committed, and then seem to be just kind of not really committed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's both to the Lord himself and to the group, you know, because those and
Yep.
there's a lot of variability is the point. But one thing I found is that some people and this might be good for your listeners to hear, is that for people leaving the institution, there is a tendency for some to like badmouth the institution.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not grasping the fact that one, God, uses his people there.
Yes.
But also that for people that are in the institution, it's difficult to separate yourself from the institution. So if you have someone who's in the wilderness or someone who's left the IC and they talk bad about the IC to someone in the IC being institutional church,
Right.
person can feel like they're being personally attacked
Yes.
and not they're just objectively talking about the system itself.
Exactly.
Right.
So that just frustrated me because some people in the group didn't seem to understand, like, these are our brothers and sisters still,
Yeah.
slow your roll a bit. Don't jump off the other side of the horse.
Right. It is unfortunate because there does for people seeing the issues with the institution and the ways in which it can hinder the Lord. There is this tendency or this temptation anyway to kind of villainize the institution, and then it's like that's the thing that we're against now. Instead of understanding that, no, we're being called on to being for something bigger, something greater, the Lord Jesus Christ himself.
Unto the Lord.
We're not being called to be against something.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely. You can't be passionate about the absence of something. You have to be moving towards something. That applies to dealing with temptation or dealing with anything. I mean, you can't just try not to think about it. You've got to
turn to something else.
Yeah.
turn towards something.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
The Lord.
Yeah.
Yep. You said you wanted to say something about the organic church.
Organic.
Yes, I was
Or the word
reading
organic.
Organic.
a book by Neil Cole last night, and he made a good point. I want to elaborate on it. Hold on, I'm reading my notes.
Okay.
I'll read to you what I wrote, and this will maybe generate good discussion. Don't think of organic church as a way of congregating. That dilutes the understanding of church. The church is organic, period. When he uses the IC, it's in an organic way inside the institution, because that's who God is. It is therefore, it's in their nature to be organic. In other words, the main point that whatever we discuss about this, the main point I want to get is that organic church, it's not like here's one way of doing church and here's another way of doing church.
Right.
One, because it dilutes our understanding of the word church.
Right.
The Lord is organic. There's no church without that. Okay, it's just like if the Lord uses the institution, which of course he does, it's not going to be like out of a different aspect of him that's not organic. It's just going to be like
His life still comes out within the saints who are still in the institutional church
in an organic way. It's allowed.
Yeah. I mean, because you get to know people, you'll share life, you'll share the Lord with each other, and in the quote organic church, there is still people that teach other people things, right?
Yeah.
And in the institutional church, it just seems that some of the aspects of the kingdom of God are, and the arsenal of God's tools are more free to be used. The role of teacher is well used in the institutional church. The role of apostle or prophet or sometimes evangelist, not so much, to varying degrees.
No, I think you're tracking with what we've been talking about. I don't know if it's been on the air or just amongst ourselves, how organic church isn't necessarily the noun, but the adjective. And just because we get so caught up in our mindsets that we think that if it's in the IC, then it's bad automatically.
Oh, yeah.
But even though in the organic church there will be seasons of teaching and seasons of certain aspects that are in the IC, and we can turn our harden our hearts against them just because they were a part of the IC, instead of realizing they're actually a part of God and who He is, and He's using that now in this season here, as opposed to that looks too much like the IC. I can't we can't use that, touch that, because that's part of the IC.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, imagine if you thought your child would be a really good plumber, and your child said, you know what, I think I want to be an accountant, and tried to be an accountant and did a decent job, not an amazing job. Like, would you, like, not spend holidays with your child? Would you not, like, still have a good relationship with your child just because they weren't doing what you thought would be best for them to do and use their skills? Like, no, like, that's stupid. God loves his family, his bride, more than
not coming for Christmas
we can imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you spent 3.5 years in Gainesville, and then what happened?
Then what happened, the Lord will, growing up you hear, your life's going to take turns you never expected, and, it's just one of those cliches, but yeah, it totally did. So I got a degree in counseling, and I really loved my job, but I didn't want to do it for the rest of my life, so I thought, okay, maybe I could be a nurse. Mm-hmm. So I, for years, went to school to do prereqs. That was some of the big changes I alluded to earlier, fall of 2010. So did years of prereqs while working. Eventually applied to nursing school and got accepted to nursing school.
Yep.
And that was about a 3-year process. And during the first semester in nursing school was, everything was cool. But in October of that fall, I felt like I was supposed to pray for a trial. That was 2011. Sorry. Anyway, I was supposed to pray for a trial. And that's not a prayer that I take lightly, because if I like feel a desire to pray that, I'm thinking that's the Lord, because I don't like pain. I don't like difficulty, but, and so I sat on it for a while before I actually prayed it. But I was like, this is not leading me. So Lord, I don't like pain. I don't want difficulty, but if it's going to get me to know you more, well then yes, Lord, give me a trial. And so like the next couple of days, when I would drive really carefully because I didn't want to get into an accident. But nothing, months passed and nothing happened. So I was like, all right, whatever. So the next semester in nursing school, I started to feel anxious about being in there. And weeks went by, and of course I'm thinking, holy crap, I think this is the answer to my prayer, because I wanted to be a traveling nurse. You get paid a lot. You can kind of set your own schedule. You always have a job because there's a nursing shortage. So it would just be awesome. So that was my dream for my life. And, but as the weeks went on, this feeling of unease about being in the program, it only got worse, only got stronger. And to the point where in March, about 2 months into that semester, I felt like I was kind of like betraying God by even being in my classes. So, I submitted the paperwork to withdraw from the program, and I had nothing. The next week we were presenting songs that we saw the Lord in at our meeting, and my song that I presented was "Sweet Nothing" by Florence Henderson. Or Florence on the Machine, I forget.
Yeah.
Anyway, because I had nothing. I was still working those jobs, so I had a source of income. But in terms of what I wanted to do with my life, I had absolutely no clue. Mm-hmm. So I just worked the jobs and, just kind of lived life. And about 6 weeks later, I was in a coffee shop, because I love to go to coffee shops. And I was reading a book on suffering and how the Lord uses suffering and whether or not the Lord is good and that sort of thing, which is pivotal and poignant because Milt, who we've mentioned in other programs, he will tell us that if you want to be involved in the work of church planting, you're going to suffer. And so I was reading that book, and completely out of nowhere, the Lord said, or I sensed the Holy Spirit leading me to respond to an email that Milt had sent out 3 months prior to that, asking for church planters or people who were interested in church planting to to be part of this training that he was doing. And the funny thing is, I didn't even read the email. All I read when it was sent out in January was, I just read the subject line and I deleted it because I had absolutely no interest in doing it. Like I said, I didn't move to Gainesville to be part of the church. I was just something,
right.
Something I felt the Lord led me to do. I didn't have nearly the buy-in, and I wasn't, and I'm using air quotes again, I wasn't nearly as into organic church as a lot of other people were. Yep. It just seemed, it's like, okay, if the Lord wants me to congregate with these people, that's fine. That's what I'll do. And so, I emailed and mailed. I told him, dude, I don't want to do this. I don't know what I want to do with my life, but it's not this. I had money. My jobs paid me well. I had friends in Gainesville. Gainesville's a pretty nice place to live. If you can deal with the heat, which I totally can because I like the heat, bizarrely. But I was like, no, I'm going to get with people that I trust and have every single one of these people pray with me about it. And even if one of these people thinks that I shouldn't be doing this, well, then I'm not going to be doing it.
Yep.
Well, guess what? They all thought that I should be doing it. So I left my home of maybe 15 years and drove to California. And for about the first hour driving away from Gainesville, I just couldn't say anything but, I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe I'm doing this. Because it was just such a paradigm shift. And I was getting so much flack from my biological family. And it just didn't, for a lot of reasons, it didn't make any sense financially.
Right.
It was just, it was just crazy. So yeah, but looking back, I would not change a thing.
So you went out to California.
Too much. What?
So you went out to California.
I did. I went out to California and lived in a ramshackle RV that maybe a third of the time that myself and these other two guys were living there, it actually had plumbing.
No, for real. Like the couple whose property it was on rented a porta potty to sit outside next to it for them to use.
They did.
Classy. Classy.
Yeah. So,
the good life.
Whatever. I mean, I was a single guy, and the other two guys were single. So I mean, we could roll with it, and we got gym memberships, so that's where we took our showers. It was fine. The family was really cool.
Yeah, but, sure.
Well, and eventually they let you move into the house.
Yeah. Thankfully, once they found out that we weren't like crazy in a bad way, crazy in a good way, then they're like, oh, okay, these people are they're actually like normal, sort of,
Sort of. They're at least closer to normal than psycho. Yeah. So yep.
Yeah, and I know one of the sisters in the first church we went to, she thought we were going to have like a bunch of tattoos and have like crazy hair and stuff just because we
really.
I don't know, like living in an RV and like moving across like the country. She associated that with like hippiness, and she totally had her paradigm changed.
Yes.
You're a paradigm shifter, Thomas.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So what's the Lord doing now?
Oh, sure. Now you get to ask that question.
Yep. Okay. Wait, what did you want to say, Thomas?
I want to go back to that analogy that I was saying earlier.
Okay.
Not the analogy about dying to self.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you guys had your episode about the cross, I thought it was a great episode, but also I'm going to use the example of myself and another brother that I know in terms of the Lord tailor-making difficult circumstances.
Okay.
I have, I would say that this may come off sounding strange, but I don't necessarily care about doing a lot of ministry.
Right.
Okay.
My jam is to hang out with the Lord and get to know Him. If He has me minister to people, cool. If not, I really couldn't care less.
Right.
But one thing that I do want, and a weakness of mine, and thankfully the Lord's breaking me of this, is money. Money is, for a while, I don't know if it's still, but it was a stronghold in my life. and it's definitely still occupies my thoughts. But he is,
amen,
breaking me of that slowly. And so, picture that opposite this brother of ours, and he is the opposite. Like he really cares about ministry and really helping people. Really has a heart to really, show God's love to people. And he couldn't really care less about having a lot of money. It's just not a weakness for him. But the circumstances that the Lord has each of us in is the exact opposite of what each of us want. For example, me, I'm in a situation where I'm doing a lot of ministry, but I'm working at a coffee shop, right? And I'm making very little money there. So that's difficult for me. But with he, at least last time we spoke about it, was in a season where the Lord was saying no to any ministry. So he was doing no ministry, and it was killing him, right? But his job, he does computer stuff, and he makes a ton of money, right? And so fleshly wise, I would want to be him and he would want to be me, right? But the Lord is tailor making each of our situations to break us in the way that we need to be broken. So right now what the Lord is doing, I am 37, and almost all of my adult life I've been very happily single. But in the past 6 months, that's kind of taken a turn where I started to pursue someone, and she and I moved back to Florida to pursue this relationship, and it both of us were in agreement that the Lord was leading it, and about 2 to 3 months into it, she ended it. And did it in the nicest possible way. And that's not sarcasm.
No.
And it was very difficult, but I know, and I still am 100% confident that the Lord led us to do it because, for many reasons that I won't get into here, but basically, he wanted to show me what it was like to pursue and have his pursuits be in vain, because he pursues his bride, and sometimes his bride rejects him. I was pursuing this woman, and this woman in a sense rejected me. And we're still really good friends, so there's no bitterness, there's no anger or anything like that, but it was definitely painful, there's no doubt about it. But the Lord doesn't waste anything.
No.
And actually, that phrase, the Lord doesn't waste anything, that implies that I was we were doing our own thing. And the Lord's just we had our scraps. He's okay, I'm going to use these scraps for something good. But that's not what I'm trying to emphasize. It was the Lord will lead us in places that will be unpleasant because that's what he wants, right? And so I am glad that I did all of it because I learned pieces of the Lord that I would never known otherwise.
Yep.
Right.
So
Yes and amen. Earlier when you were talking about the Lord, you feeling led to pray for a trial or suffering, it made me think of testing, not so much trial for the sake of trial, but that the trials test our faith, right? And the Lord tests his work in us. And it made me think of David praying, asking the Lord to search my heart. Try me, O Lord.
right.
And but also that there are some aspects of the Lord that we will only know through suffering.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
If we are only willing to embrace the blessing but not the testing, then we're literally going to miss a huge portion of the Lord.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One thing that you mentioned things that I've learned, I would say there's really important parts of walking the Lord that I just didn't really hear much about until recently. But when Paul says, "I desire to experience the fellowship of his sufferings,"
Yeah.
when you're if you're soldiers in a war, you suffer together. And because of the deepness of that experience, you'll name children after fellow soldiers. Like you have there is a fellowship that can only happen in difficult circumstances. And let's say you're in a difficult circumstances and you're alone, you would want someone to be there with you to help you through it.
Right.
Well, imagine the suffering of the Lord. There are times when he presents to us a difficult circumstances because he wants us to experience the fellowship of his suffering. And when we turn our back on that, in a sense, it's leaving the Lord to his own suffering and not allowing communion with him through that.
Yeah.
The other side of it is that we're going to be alive for billions of years, and we're going to look back on this time, this short, brief window of 80 years, where we have the opportunity to experience the fellowship of his suffering. Once we physically die, no more tears, no more death, right? And we're going to be looked back wow, I don't like suffering, but I really wish, in a sense, I could go back and experience the fellowship of his suffering because I don't have that opportunity now, right? So there's no other time in our existence where we're going to have the ability to
opportunity
push through sin to get to the Lord and push through pain. So
I like that.
Awesome. Thomas, we are really looking forward to seeing you.
Yes.
In just a few weeks.
I'm really looking forward to y'all seeing me as well.
Well, I'm seeing you right now, bro.
That's right.
We are excited that you're going to be at the conference.
Yeah.
And we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to visit with us because your story and your surrender to the Lord is very encouraging. What's helps us press on. What's the word I'm looking for?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's the best thing.
We're all together in this.
Yeah.
So now that we're at the end, we'll set it up where Thomas is, we consider him a co-worker of ours in the Lord, and in a lot of ways. The Babians and Thomas have worked with groups of saints together, and then the Walters and Babians and Thomas have worked with groups of saints together. Then this July, the Hardys and Walters and Babians and Thomas will work with saints together at the conferences. We all get to meet everybody and all that good stuff.
Yeah. And then later this year, Thomas is going with another couple to Philly to work with a group.
You are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
A church in Philadelphia.
I get to experience cold.
You do, yes. Legit cold.
Yeah, like actual cold, not like cold for a weekend, but no, it's going to be cold.
Right.
Where the highs are like the lows that you're used to.
Yeah, exactly.
If that.
So we'll pray for you.
Yeah.
Need it. Praying fast, man. I'm going to
Praying fast.
All right, Thomas. Thanks so much, brother. We love you.
We love you.
cool. Rock and roll. See you later, everybody.
Hey, all right. So listen again to thesaints.com and listen again just because we like people. And till next time, this is RC.
This is Andrew.
This is Tyrone.
This is Allison. This is Carrie.
And this is Bridget.
This is Thomas.
Woohoo!